Hello, I'm Jan Falconer, and welcome to Not-Netflix Natters, a place where stories, family, and everyday life gives us something to think about. Let's begin. Hi, this is Not-Netflix Natters, Series 4, Episode 6. I'm Jan Falconer. I'm an author, consultant, grandmother, and this is Not-Netflix Natters, and today's episode is about learning together. When my children were little, I thought I was supposed to know all the answers. Why does this happen? Because. Why does this work? Because. There was always an answer, and I was usually in a hurry to give it. As I look back now, I can see why. I was always on the meter. There was always somewhere I had to be. Something to do, dinner to make, work to finish. I thought I didn't have the luxury of time. Experience has taught me something quite different. I'm probably busier now than I ever was then. The difference isn't time. It's my attitude towards it. I know now that I won't get those moments back. And sometimes the few minutes I thought I couldn't afford to spend on a question would have been time very well spent, time invested to avoid potential problems downstream. Perhaps that's one of the things that we get to learn when we get older. We don't have to know everything. Well, I certainly don't. My mother understood that long before I did. Her own formal education had ended very young, although she returned to study and became a registered nurse and midwife. I always thought she was enormously knowledgeable, but she never pretended to know something that she didn't. If I asked her a question that she couldn't answer, she might say, "Let's look it up in the encyclopaedia." Sometimes she'd look at the encyclopaedia we had at home and decide it's too old. Go to the library, look in Britannica, or she'd tell me to go and ask the librarian. You may not believe this, but when I was young, I was quite shy. So I'd ask, "What do I say?" "The question you're asking me," she'd say. Her reply was quite matter-of-fact and simple, really. The public library in New Plymouth wasn't just around the corner. I had to catch a bus into the city and then walk to this rather imposing big building. I was only 8 or 9, but that wasn't particularly unusual for those times. Once I got there, the librarians were wonderful, and slowly I learnt something. Not knowing the answer didn't have to be the end of the conversation. You know what? It could be the beginning of finding out. Years later, one of my sons said to me, "But Mum, you're really brainy." "Every day's a school day," I told him, and I still believe that. What I might add today, though, is that being knowledgeable doesn't mean knowing everything. I'm curious. I want to learn more. Every day's a school day because there's always something else to discover. I approach my grandchildren's questions rather differently from the way I approached those endless questions when my children were small. Now, when I hear "why?" I don't necessarily rush to supply the "because." I might ask, "What do you think?" Or, "What makes you say that?" Or sometimes, "Why are you asking me?" And the last question can be particularly revealing because the question they've asked isn't necessarily the question they want answered. Something has prompted it. They've seen something, they've heard something, or something has simply made them wonder. If I give them the answer too quickly, I can potentially close down the very conversation that they were trying to start. That doesn't mean every childhood question needs to become a major research project. Oh, no. Parents are busy, grandparents are busy, teachers are busy. Sometimes the question genuinely has to be, that's a really interesting question. Let's come back to it. The important thing is that we do. And when I don't know, I'm quite happy to say so and suggest, let's find out. We might go to the library. We might get the phone or the iPad or the laptop out. Then we check. What does that source say? Can we find another one? Do they agree? Where has that information come from? Does it make sense? I don't want children simply to believe something because an adult, a website, a video, or an AI tool has told them that it's true. And that includes me. It's also interesting to note that Mr. ChatGPT says AI can make mistakes. Occasionally, I've even had a little fun with that. I speak French badly. My granddaughter knows the days of the week in French. So every now and then I deliberately get one wrong. Monday. Surely that's Mardi. There's usually a pause. Are you sure, Nonna? I think it's Lundi. I persist for a little while until eventually she gets exasperated. Nonna! Yes, I'm being naughty, of course, but underneath the joke, I know whether she's simply agreeing with me because I'm an adult or whether she's trusting what she knows and questions me. She does, and I'm very pleased that she does. Why does this matter? Because adults aren't always right either. Perhaps that's one of the most valuable things we can model for children. We can be knowledgeable without pretending to know everything. We can change our minds, we can ask questions, we can check, and we can be interested in what someone else thinks. I've had to learn that myself. I used to worry about asking questions in a room full of people. Surely everyone else knows the answer. I didn't want to be the one who put their hands up yet again, and I usually did. These days, I don't care nearly so much. Not long ago, I was watching a live discussion while baking. The speaker invited questions, and I had one I really wanted answered. Unfortunately, my fingers were covered in flour. I washed my hands, and I told him, my fingers were covered with flour, and I really want to know the answer of this question, but I'm baking a pie. He laughed. I had clean hands, so I typed the questions. Somewhere between the little shy girl standing in the library and the woman who interrupted her pie making to type a question with wet fingers, I learnt that there really isn't anything wrong with saying, I don't know, and I don't understand, or simply, why? Children seem to know this instinctively. They arrive into the world really curious. They ask, why? How? What's that? What happens if I do this? The questions can be relentless, particularly when you're busy living family life rather than standing back and reflecting on it. I know, I've been there. But experience has taught me that perhaps we don't need to rush quite so quickly to close those questions down. Sometimes we can answer. Sometimes we can ask another question. Sometimes the child might know more than we do. And sometimes we can quite simply say, I don't know. Let's find out. My mother had an encyclopaedia. Britannica was at the library. Today we have libraries, books, phones, search engines, videos, databases, and AI. The tools have changed enormously, but the principle hasn't. None of us needs to be the Oracle of Delphi. children don't need perfect adults with an answer ready for every question. In fact, they need interested adults who are willing to listen, wonder, ask, check, and sometimes learn right alongside them. Because learning isn't something adults finish and then hand over to children. We're all doing it all the time. After all, every day is a school day. Thank you for joining me today. If you've enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe, visit my website and explore the books. Until next time, take care.